welcome to Data and Dollars with Doug. This is where we break down the financial side of the dealership. We turn your numbers into clarity and performance into profit. Each episode, Doug's going to take a closer look at what your financials are really telling you, and more importantly, what they're not. Because at the end of the day, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And if you can't manage it, you're leaving money on the table. We're also going to start every episode with just a basic economic situation where we're at in the global and local economies. So let's get into it. Doug, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you, sir? Good to see you.
I'm well. Thanks for being with us again, and thanks for hosting the show with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doug, we were talking a little earlier, and you said there's a lot of activity going on, and you kind of laughed at me because I look at my K on a buy probably at least 2 or 3 times a week basis. You say, don't do that.
It'll wear you out. It'll make you crazy.
But there's been a lot of activity in the market.
Yeah, there has.
I looked at the beginning part of the month and we were down, or at least I was down. Now I'm right back up and above where I was. So what the heck is going on?
Yeah, it's an interesting time, like we said, with the war or whatever action we've got there in the Middle East. Oil, as we know, has spiked. We are seeing higher gas prices. So the fear of inflation is absolutely prevalent. You can't turn on a single channel in the country and somebody not complain about the price of something. And so with inflation, you think rates could be going up. The Federal Reserve right now, they really don't know what's going to happen. But shockingly enough, we have hit all-time highs again on the S&P and NASDAQ, and the Dow's just not that far off. So even with oil eclipsing $100 and $106 a barrel today, I think is where I saw that at, has been higher. I think we did a 119 or something there a little bit. So it's come down a little bit. It hasn't come down to the point that you're going to feel relief. We've had some slowdown in the bombings and that kind of stuff. But I'm here to tell you, it's the volatility. It is so different than it's ever been. The things that you would normally predict for your 401k, if your advisor gives you advice right now, I'm going to say he doesn't know either. He's just trying to, or she or whoever, they're just working and doing everything they can to kind of make sense of what's going on. So it is very interesting. So look at it, but just know this: it's kind of like the weather in Kentucky. It's going to change.
Yeah, or Nebraska. I mean, it was snowing a little bit this morning.
Is that right? Give it 10 minutes; it'll be 85 and sunny. So
yeah. In December and January, even February, we couldn't buy a snowstorm, and now it's going to snow at the end of April.
It's May. It's time. But yeah, so a lot of people do that. I'm not a set it and forget it guy either. I do think you need to pay attention, obviously, in case you need to rebalance your portfolio if you get too much in equities or, not enough in fixed asset kind of stuff. But just to look at it every day, you will worry yourself to death. Yeah. Sometimes you just got to go to work.
Exactly. But there's a lot of activity as far as news and events happening.
Yeah. So this week, there's 5 or 6 major countries in the world. They're central banks, just like the Federal Reserve. They're going to meet tomorrow and Wednesday. Our Federal Reserve will, and they're going to try and figure out what their rate policy is going to be. Obviously, do they put more in, take some out, or are they going to raise or lower rates, those kind of things, and what triggers can they pull to keep things moving along? So the consumer has been ridiculously resilient through all this, but the savings rates are down, and we're starting to see some credit stress that we haven't seen in a while. And I think that's something we've got to keep an eye on. If inflation does, in fact, sustain itself over a longer period of time, you're going to see some people miss a payment on a home equity loan or a car loan or stuff like that. So we don't want those to get out of hand. We want to see people continue to try and save a little bit. But very interesting time. A lot of reports right now. This is a report month. So we got the first quarter completed. All the banks have reported here in the last several weeks and still solvent. They're not showing big signs of credit stress. I'd like to see what the regionals all went to JP Morgan Chase, that top 200 banks. I'd like to see where they're at. It gives you a good idea, especially on a regional basis, how your economy is doing. And then we'll get all that consolidated here in the 1st of May, and we'll get a better look from the Fed standpoint of like how planning for farming. We'll start to see some of those reports coming out, that kind of stuff, and kind of see how the general economy is doing. I will say, from the banking standpoint on the farm side, there have been more farmers utilizing direct credit or private credit sources this year than ever. And we had about 12,000 acres this week with a group that is, I won't call them a lender last resort, but their institutions had stepped away from the opportunity to give them their operating money this year, which if you're getting operating money on May 1st, you have not pre-purchased anything last fall. So I don't know what your fertilizer, fuel, all those things, seed and chemical, that's going to be tough because those are up since last fall. So I think we're going to see some real agricultural stress through 26. And I don't know about you. You were talking about you couldn't buy a snowstorm. Well, we can't buy rain. There's a lot of our central U.S. It's the drought index is higher than it's been. We actually had a few farmers in our area that quit planting just because they couldn't find moisture. So
Wow.
Every drop's going to count this year.
Yes, sir. And you bring up a really good point. The people that and the farms that didn't hedge and pre-purchase, especially some of the guys that I've talked to around our area, if you didn't hedge it out and prepay a year ago, you almost can't afford your fertilizer now or your fuel. A lot of guys hedge that fuel. They buy a lot of fuel for the upcoming spring and summer, and they prepay for it in late fall. And if you did that a year ago, it may have been a little tough. You're paying $3.40, $3.50 a gallon, but now you're paying $4.80, $4.90 a gallon.
Yeah.
You feel pretty smart.
I think that's a big deal. I mean, it is smart to do it, but 25 was not a banner year. And folks who had some stress on their year or had some crop failure that, you can't crop insurance your way to prosperity. It's to kind of get you through, but it's going to keep you from doing the things that sometimes you need to have that prepay power. And some folks just didn't have it last year. And I'm surprised. We worked really hard with our institution to make sure our farmers found a way to farm. Wasn't always as we'd liked or expected to, but we just had a couple of tough years. But by and large, I think that you got to stay in the game.
Yeah.
You're in it. You got to stay after it. But
what's your choice, right? And I have heard of a few guys in our regional area that heard the same thing from their local institute that, we just can't do it. We can't give you an operating loan this year. And it's like,
there's more retirement sales this year than I've seen in years past. A lot of those. If you follow some of these bigger regional equipment companies that do these auctions, doom scroll that for a little while. It'll tear you up a little bit. But I think we got to stay in the game.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Do everything we can to do it as wise as possible.
But interesting times, like I said, once we figure out where we're going and we keep an eye on interest rates, we're still not in 80, 81 type stuff. We're still doing loans in the 6.5 to 8 range, depending on the risk and that kind of thing. And that's it's tougher than it was, but it's palatable. It's not 12 or 14, 16% interest.
18,
my gosh, yeah.
Can you imagine the 80s, 18, 19% interest rates? Wow.
Yeah.
Tough. So interest rates being, what'd you say, like 6.5?
If you're doing real estate, you're going to be in the 6.5 to 7 range probably.
And what do you think those rates are going to look like going out throughout the year? We're going to hold true?
If I knew what they were going to be, I wouldn't have to do podcasts with you.
Exactly. No. I knew what the fourth quarter was going to look like.
The biggest thing is knowing that you're not over levered on your balance sheet. I think we're really working hard this year, whether it's businesses or farms or construction, any project we're in the middle of. We want to make sure that there is a decent liquidity. You need some cash on hand. You got to be able to generate cash in a pretty quick time frame. And so farms usually within a year you can turn things to cash. If you needed to, you have to have some liquidity on your balance sheet. If you're not over levered and you've got some pretty good equity percentage, so the owner's equity percentage we look at varies. The way real estate's gone, a lot of guys have, 40% or less debt on their balance sheet. So for $10 million, you got $4 million of debt. Okay, is that palatable? Depends on what they're in, but just in a general sense, you've got some equity there. So you always got the ability to borrow back, I guess. But there's a point where you can't cash flow it. And
Right.
from the banking and regulatory standpoint, if it doesn't cash flow, you got to really, I don't care how much equity you think you have, it may or may not matter. So we're running out of the rope to go back and refinance people. But the crazy part is asset based farm balance sheets that have real estate as the anchor far exceed the equipment guy. Dirt, if you don't get dirt, you don't get hurt. I think I've said that on here before. As a banker, it's still good to have around.
Yeah.
Still
Right.
good to have around.
Yep.
Well, you want to flip into some of the dealership stuff, and maybe we can see how the economy's going. Like I said, there's a lot of things going on, but we're talking about sustainability. I think is really where we're trying to head. Not that we're in.
Yeah,
We
that's
were talking
exactly
earlier
right.
on the equipment side.
Right. Sustainability, one of the key metrics that we look at inside a dealership, obviously we're looking at your balance sheet as well, but we look at your absorption rate. And, when we talk absorption with our dealers, we're saying, hey, between your parts gross margin, your service gross margin, and your rental gross margin, can your dealership absorb 100% of all your fixed expenses plus interest, right? I don't care so much about whether you can cover your whole goods compensation, bonus plans, and all that, because if you're not really selling any whole goods, you don't have those expenses anyway. But can you in your dealership keep the lights on and keep all the bills paid out of your fixed operations? And sustainability, like we're talking, has got to come out of those departments. And the goal is we want to shoot for 100% absorption. And I'm telling you, Doug, there's a lot of dealerships that I visit with that would be happy if they could get into the 85% absorption or above,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get to 85, I'm going to call you recession proof, but you can weather a storm or two where your competitor may or may not. Thing I always liked about absorption back when we worked together a lifetime ago, but it still stands true. Doesn't matter when you're in it. When you've got a metric that will provide you the ability to keep your lights on, and absorption is that metric in the equipment world, construction, automotive, doesn't matter, agriculture.
Exactly.
Absorption, all of those industries use that, and it's a common metric. It's also not uncommon to be miscalculated. And I think
That's right.
you do a lot of teaching of that. But truly, at the end of the day, your parts and service and rental are going to pay your bills, right? So, irregardless of whether the new equipment sales are happening or not, if it's now more of a rental fleet, things change up and down. But your day to day, you're going to be able to pay your people, keep your lights on, be able to sustain your business without the threat of failure, because you're so strong on your margins and you know your cost and you know what your margins are. What we said, margin matters. And if you can keep that in line, you've got a real opportunity to handle the kind of economy that we may be falling ourselves into in 2026.
Yeah, because I haven't seen and talked to very many dealers that are bragging about their whole good sales, and they haven't been bragging about their whole good sales for
2
dang near
years.
4 months. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We were down 15-16% last year, and it's running toward 18 and 26 already. And like I said, there was farm sales this year, so people are trying to get the horsepower of new, but they're buying slightly used, and are, because that rental or the things coming off a rental. And a lot of times people will rent by the hour because they can't afford the machine,
Right.
and so that creates a lot of inventory fluff out there. So they're buying these machines in the softer used market, trying to get the same horsepower and performance that they would get out of a new machine. And I
Yeah.
think what kills me the most is I'm watching whole goods coming out with a 2 to 4% expectation in 26 for price increases.
How?
Hang on. A 3% increase on $1 million machine is $30,000. Think about that. We used to think, oh, it's only 2%. Well, it was only 2% on 400 grand. Well, now it's 4% on $1 million machine, and it grows on you. The things we used to think were normal are no longer normal when you put it in dollars and cents.
Not at all.
Yeah, grab that for a minute and think, okay, that's an employee. Just so I can change a machine, but I can't. I still have to have the employee, but it's going to cost me an extra 30 grand to, just have him in the machine or her in the machine. It's a different world, and that's
It is.
the scale of what it takes right now is incredible. And that's why 1% on an interest rate makes a much bigger difference than it did in 1981. That's
Yes,
why
sir.
a percent or two would tick up. And that's why your margins are more important today than ever, because the same margin you had before is a different dollar today. Does that make sense? And
Totally.
so, yeah,
Totally, man. And that's what I see with several of our construction dealers is they're doing their financials are doing pretty good. They're pretty solid. And a lot of that income is coming out of their fixed operations. It's coming from the rental division and it's coming out of parts and service. Because it doesn't matter what dealership group I talk to, whether it's our automotive dealers, our construction dealers, or our farm and ag dealers, their whole good sales are not carrying the weight at all.
yeah,
But in construction, I really see the financials have improved just due to rental, parts, and service.
yeah. I'm curious to see how this year plays out as we get into the fall, what inventories on our car lots look like. I know that a lot of the equipment dealers, all your major players, have ratcheted back production. Their boards are full, but they're not producing what they were 2 years ago. And I think that's going to play into it, but they've got to manage their new inventory down. So they might ask for 2 to 4%, but they're not going to sell nearly as many. So again, it gets back to your gross revenue in your dealership. Even if you have a margin on whole goods, it's not going to be your sustainer. Man, that absorption rate is critical mass.
Yep. And you mentioned it earlier, people miscalculate that number for, I think sometimes just to pat ourselves on the back, but really, who cares? You're only kidding yourself, right? I
Yeah.
don't care what your number says it is, so you can go brag to your buddies at your 20 group saying, "Oh, we're 102% absorbed," but your balance sheet keeps shrinking, and your profitability, your equity margin keeps compressing. You
Yeah.
got to fix your operational issues and
Yeah, I would
inefficiencies.
always lean to the conservative on that. Don't manipulate it just to win the 20 group. It's like winning the press conference as a coach and losing the game.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
big
right.
deal. Yeah, don't win the press conference, man. You got to
Yeah,
win the game.
yeah, you're not going to get the brass ring or the diamond ring if you're not
No,
winning games.
no, that's exactly right.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're seeing that with your dealers. What's probably the most common mistake that you see in a calculation of absorption? I'm just
So
curious.
and it may not always be the mistake, but the accounts that they try to push off and say, well, that's really not a fixed expense. And we don't calculate rent that way. And we own the building. So we're going to take the rent factor out.
Yeah,
Yeah. If you're owning the holdings company, you might be able to manipulate that, but truly it's an
might be the
expense.
case.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. There's still money moving somewhere to pay for those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would lean to the conservative if it was me. I'd want to make it hard on myself, but now in the 20 group, I might have to, peel it around a little bit, make sure I
Yeah.
don't make,
Sometimes you
I
got
don't
to
want to
peel that
bottom
onion
out.
back.
But it's big. I mean, and that's pride, right? I mean, you get in there and you're like, oh man, well, that really doesn't count. Well, count it and then figure out how to fix it. Then you really are recession proof. That
That's right.
you're including as much as you can in there and saying, okay, that's a real self-reflective truth moment when you can say, I'm going to count everything and I'm going to find the 85.
That's
Then
right.
you start to ratchet your margins, or you realize how important some of your VIP customers are that use you a lot, continue to have good margins, aren't discount, thieves on you. I mean, you find out pretty quick who's paying your bills, and you work hard to keep those people because you can't afford to lose them. It's the 80-20 rule, right?
That's
You
right.
got to stay in the game.
That's right. And when I think a lot of times when dealers are doing that manipulation of their data to try to look more impressive and be more impressive, that's never impressed me. But I think what it does is it hurts your people because they believe they're really performing well. And
Yeah.
they may be underperforming in the game, and you're telling them, hey, you're a winner, winner, winner. Everybody's getting these participation awards, but you're really not. You're not winning,
Yeah.
right? You've got a
Yeah.
lot of inefficiencies going on in your departments, but you're not holding your people accountable. It's not the same A score as somebody else.
Yeah.
You're grading yourself as a B minus and saying you're an A plus when you've got some inefficiencies. You need to improve your operations.
Yeah. Because efficiency is the key to life. I mean, if you're out here wasting money and not accounting properly for things, you're going to give yourself a false sense of security. to your point, if your balance sheet's gone backwards, but your absorption looks good, you've let one metric dictate your entire portfolio. That's why you need, 5 to 7 key metrics in whatever business you're in. Some dealing with your balance sheet, assets and liabilities. Some dealing with your revenue and expense. Absorption would be a revenue and expense, monitor for the equipment industry. But if you don't know your markers, you can get so myopically focused on one that you will crush something else that will actually take you down. And we've seen that on efficiency in our industry and in the banking world that, you get so focused on efficiency, which in our world is, how many cents at a dollar does it take to make a dollar, right? And you want to get that number down, but you can go so low that you don't reinvest in people, training, technology, and you wind up hurting your business 5 years from now because you shortcutted it just to win the press conference with one number. And so I would consider in banking the efficiency number much like absorption. It's a revenue number, but it's a numerator and denominator. You've got to move both of them. They're basically the same. You've got to move revenue up and hold your expenses and toe the line on those. So,
Yep. That's what I tell people all the time. You want to improve your absorption number? It's very simple. Raise your gross margin, decrease your expenses. That's it. That's only two numbers that count, right? Numerator and denominator.
It's just not rocket science, is it?
Yeah. It's not, right? I mean, I can do that math, Doug.
I saw you do it right there. It was pretty impressive, actually.
Pretty impressed, aren't you?
Yeah, pretty impressive. No, it's good, but there's lots of things that dealers have. As you know, I've been a banker most of my life, but spent some time in the equipment world, and it's ratios. It's all it is, but you have to understand them. And it doesn't matter if you're in the equipment world or if you're on the farm or in a construction environment, you have to know where your profit is and where your holes in your cheese are at. And by having a good ratio and you knowing how things affect the numerator and denominators, you will be able to tell yourself a story and craft a plan that will keep you sustainable in the light of bad years like we're having right now in some areas.
And I think that that's one thing that I see in probably the most well-run dealerships that I work with or that we work with is the owners and the operational managers operate and make decisions based on their balance sheet. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the other stores that I work with that are struggling and really fighting, and their owners and leaders all look at P&Ls. They manage everything based off of a P&L and hardly pay attention at all to their balance sheet. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, you get so focused on one that you miss out on the other.
Right.
The balance sheet, your assets should drive your revenue. Okay. Right. And your liabilities are there. And if tempered correctly and you're a good steward of whatever industry you're in, you will not overlever yourself, which will ultimately give you cash flow. And at the end, a lot of times people will get their margins right, but their cash flow still won't be correct, right? They continue to have expenses or owner draws that they're not including in there, or their interest costs because there are too many loans on their balance sheet. That interest cost will wind up taking a big bite out of their net profits and that kind of thing. So you just have to be really careful as to both. One works after the other. And if you understand how one drives the other, that's a game changer.
That's the key. I think the really well-run dealerships, the owners and the VPs, they look at the balance sheet a lot and then hold the management staff accountable for the P&L, right?
Right.
And they understand how the two are so interrelated. But, we teach a lot on whole goods washout and turns and cycles in your inventories. And I've seen really good dealerships sell themselves right into bankruptcy because they've sold so much and they haven't spun it. They haven't got out of the used, you know what I'm saying? And they've run out of cash. They burn through all that cash, and people are like, how can you just sold $1 million combine? You're just flush with cash. Or, you sold a $150,000 pickup or this SUV, and man, you're just full of cash. Well, no, we're not.
Yeah. Those are probably the thinnest margins things that you have in your dealership. It feels good.
It does.
Sounds impressive. You get your picture on your social media page, but I took a $1,000 haircut on that truck, but yeah.
And I have no cash.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I went backwards, but I sold the truck.
But I sold it. Yeah,
I'll
sold
tell
it.
you the
Got
best thing that I've done in the last couple of years is I taught a class at the bank about how the bank runs, and I taught them the balance sheet and P&L relationship. And the idea was I wanted every one of our folks to understand, one, how does your job affect both of those? And this is how the bank makes money. And I think dealerships, a lot of times we were either, you had your aftermarket group here, your whole goods group there, and you got your 20 groups on both sides. I think the brilliance in a dealership is to understand both those and your leadership. You got to get your manager suite and your executive suite all singing from the same hymn book. But because what, to your point, you said a second ago, you send this metric over here with this group or that metric with that group, and they don't know why one is there for the other. And your whole goods folks don't understand how the aftermarket makes money, and they're giving away duels and tens of thousands of dollars of equipment and stuff on it. But they sold the machine,
right.
but they've crushed your parts and service margins, and your absorption is no good because, or vice versa. Somebody's trying to get it back on the parts and service side when they needed to make it somewhere else. But yeah, you just have to everybody needs to understand how the business runs. And
Amen.
I think that is probably the one thing, regardless of what industry you're in, if you don't know how your P&L and your balance sheet work together, you are probably shortchanging yourself as an owner or as a key employee. Key employees should want to know that same thing. So.
Right. Yeah. And, I think a lot of times in dealership environments, the managers are only taught one, and that's your P&L, right? That's all
times, yeah.
And I think to your point, the executive level has got to understand the relationship between the P&L and balance sheet. And there's a lot of dealers that we work with that when you say the word balance sheet, they're like, well, that's something my accountant deals with.
Oh, no.
No.
Because that's where the rubber meets the road. Ultimately, if you're not growing your equity, you're not growing your company.
Amen.
They go together.
I think that sums this whole thing up right there. I think you said it all right there.
Yeah. Hey, at the end of the day, it's about, I need more toys than you and I need mine paid for. That's what this whole game's about. Right. And that's all it is.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's good.
Well, hey, I don't know if there's anything else you want to tell us about the market conditions, anything to look forward to at the end of the month or next month?
I think right now I want to see how we get our crop in, and I want to keep an eye on consumer spending. And it is interesting to me right now. I think that's a whole goods dilemma. Are they going to be able to continue to move vehicles like they have in the past? So I'm going to watch my 401k a little more because you've now made me feel guilty about not looking at it. But bottom line is that's the market is, how is it going all-time highs with no corrections?
That is the $1 million question right there. Is how does you said earlier, consumer confidence is still high, the market is improving, but based on what? I mean,
I don't know. I think we're going to have an interesting fall. We only have, I don't know, I'm going to say give or take 70 days between now and the end of the year that Congress will be in session both together. That's not many days to get another Farm Bill 2.0 passed and get that thing going. If we need any relief funds, because what's going to happen is you're going to have a very long, September, I think about this, maybe it's an August and October break for the November election. You only got about 30 days in a 90-day period. And, there's going to be a lot going on during that time as everybody's positioning with their constituents that they got this bill or that bill passed. And like I said, you don't have it about 40 days between now and then that they're actually going to be together. It is an election year. Okay. And it's going to be it's going to be hot. So
right.
We'll see.
I think you're right. I think, short amount of time that they're all together, but are they really going to be focused with it being an election year? Are they all going to be out trying to tout what they've done so far to make sure they stay?
I'm going to go right down the middle, and I'm going to say I don't care red or blue. Nobody's focused anyway. So.
Right.
All we do is manage distraction every day. But it's an unbelievable set of circumstances that this midterm is going to really dictate a lot of what economically can happen over the next 2 years. So they've got to position themselves as credible. So they're going to need to pass some things. Who knows? I hope they read it. That's all I know.
Amen. Yeah. Well, and as dealers, I think, you know what? Keep an eye on your absorption. Watch your P&Ls as managers and owners and general managers and VPs. You guys and gals need to be paying attention to the balance sheet.
1,000%. And you just flipped it all the way back around right there, Wayne. That was good. I'm proud of you. But if you pay attention and to things like absorption and know your margins, it's not going to matter what happens in DC, in your state capital. It's you are going to make yourself and your dealership, and we'll call it recession proof because we've all heard that term before, but you'll give yourself the sustainability, good or bad years. And if you do that, that's the thing about it is if you do it in a bad year, when you get a good year, it's amazing. Yeah, that's where the balance sheet grows. See how it works together? Yeah.
That's right.
I got it.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for Data and Dollars. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your intelligence. Thank you so much.
Good to see you. Take care of yourself. We'll talk soon.
All right. Talk to you later.